All right, a little bit delayed on this part of the journey update. It's interesting the amount of feedback I've been getting in terms of wanting to know how my training's going, whether it's people asking or people wanting to see the data or whatever. I haven't updated in a couple weeks, so I'm going to review the past 3 weeks while I'm sitting here today. There's not a lot to say about it. As you can see, there's gaps in there quite a bit. And yeah, with everything going on with my father and my grandmother and my family, it's tough. It's tough. So let's see. I believe, let me look here where I was. Yeah, so this was the week I was with my father here for these days, and then my grandmother's funeral, day with my mother, and then drove stupid long way, rode my bike for Father's Day, went and saw my kids in Shreveport and rode my bike there. So while I was out on this little hiatus here, oh, and then there's this one. I took advantage of just kind of being away and getting in something. So I ran that morning. This was in Memphis, Tennessee, when Dad was in the hospital there. And I see a 4-mile ride right here. I actually forced my brother to get on this really piece of shit hybrid tandem that we rented at this park. And we just went and rode it. And it was a ton of fun. It reminded me why I enjoy riding the bike. You know, it's like being a freaking kid again and you know, taking some corners kind of harder than he was ready. He's not a cyclist whatsoever. But I made him do it, and you know, it was a lot of fun. So I remember why I do what I do there. And then this is just kind of a run for mental health over here. This was the morning of Grandma's service. And, you know, I took advantage where mom lives on the top of this hill. And actually the top of the hill is like right in here. And basically I ran down and then ran up this other hill and just did that a couple of times. For me, it was good just to kind of suffer, kind of work through some emotions. Rode my bike at Mom's the next day. Love riding the roads out there, 1,000 feet of elevation in 20 miles. Like it's a lot of fun. I enjoy that type of riding. And then over here I rode in Shreveport in kind of some old stomping grounds. So nothing to see this week. You got four hours of training, 44 miles on the bike, minimal 269 TSS for those that understand that. But got some elevation in there. That was my goal. And then next week I'm back home, and I kind of started getting more consistent with the swimming. You know, a couple 2K days. 2K is super comfortable, can swim aerobically a long time. But man, if I start to add speed, it's just not there, and it'll wear me out for a while. So I've been working on that a little bit. You know, little running, biking, ran, swam, ran. So this would have been my longest combined run to date, and it was about 4.5, almost 5 miles. And then went out and did a pretty tough 4.5-hour bike ride on this Saturday. And I still felt this bike ride this day. So 2 days later, I still was kind of feeling the fatigue from it, and probably really Tuesday down here. So what I learned from this is we pushed pretty hard early on the first half of it going into the headwind, and I wanted to see how I would suffer down the road from that, just to kind of get a baseline of where my cycling fitness is at. So that was a really good ride for me mentally, just to kind of figure out where I'm at. Then we come into this week here. This is the current week that you'll be watching this video. And, you know, little easy run here, just to kind of shake it out. And then there was a challenge run right here. So I told a good friend of mine, an athlete, Paul Miller, that if he swam a sub 120, 100 in the pool without paddles or fins, that I would run a half marathon. And sure enough, son of a gun ran it. I swam it right there. So I paid up. The next day I paid my debt. And so my goal for this run was to see the breaking point of the muscles, more importantly of the other supporting soft tissue, the tendons and ligaments, things like that. You can see this run, heart rate wise, was completely aerobic. And it had some efforts way down here, but minimal. And then pacing was very aerobic. So it aligned with kind of the Ironman thought process and theory, which inside the final 8 weeks, it needs to be very specific to what you're doing. So, and you can see here, if you watch this red here, this heart rate, you can see it just kind of holds and holds and holds. So what I was doing is I was taking a break every mile. And then the brakes kind of got mixed up a bit because it was a 1.6 mile loop that I just ran continuously. I'll show you that on the map here. So this is out here at my house, and I just ran this loop continuously, forward or backward. And so, You'll see I get more breaks out here. These I had to stop and as an ode to a good friend of mine, Stephen Klicka, and Will Close will understand this, these were stretch breaks. This is where hamstring attachment tendon started to kind of get tight. It's where patella tendon started to get tight. And I knew what to do. I just stopped and stretched them and continued on. And then, worked through it. The main focus was aerobic through at least the first 90 minutes, completely chill. And then after that was, let's just see what's happening. Wasn't running for time, was just knew I wanted to run the distance. And then out here, you'll see this last mile right here is pretty sporty. And this one, I did this for my homies, is what I said. I wanted to see what I had at the end. Just as a test to myself mentally, can I force myself to stay deep in that hurt locker long enough to run a solid mile? And the answer was yes. And believe it or not, the harder I ran, the less the tendons and ligaments hurt. So what I assumed before but deduced from this is that when I'm running slower, my cadence is a little bit lower. A little bit higher. And so I'm doing a lot of steps, and my tendons and ligaments are not ready for that. And so you'll notice over here that my cadence drops down a bit, and that's because I started to kind of stride it out a bit more, open my stride up, let the hips kind of lead the way a little bit more, and really focus on my form. So it's kind of how I work through the pains, and stretching. So obviously did that. Swam with friends yesterday, a little bike ride with friends yesterday. We put in some really good digs here, some good 30-second, pretty hard efforts. All the stuff that I did yesterday, again, to be race focused, is overgearing stuff. So when my 30-second pull would come up, it was myself and Will and Josh Davis. And when my pull would come up, I'd gear it all the way down. So I'm running 5311 gearing, for those that know what that is. Basically the hardest gear that you have, and I'm just mashing. So the cadence drops way down. Let's see if we can see it in the data real quick. Reason for that is I want to simulate going up a mountain or up a hill. And what happens is when you go up a hill, and let's say the climb is 90 minutes, 60 to 90 minutes, you're in one gear the entire time, and a lot of time your RPM's relatively lower than if it were in the flats. But you can see the little intervals we put in here kind of as we rotate through. Heart rate indicates we're putting in some work back here on this back end. But you can see, let's see here. Let's isolate out this little section here for those that want to see any of this fun stuff. If you don't, just bear with me, we'll get through it. So this is sitting in recovery, and you can look. So my RPM go from mid-90s, and then I start putting in, the work, and it goes to mid-60s, right? So that overgearing stuff and these little troughs right here. And that one actually got down pretty low. This one wasn't as low as mid-70s. So the goal ultimately was and you can see as I'm coming along through here, you can see that I start to fatigue a little bit muscularly because the cadence comes up, and my mind tells me, make it easier, make it easier, make it easier. And I allowed that to happen initially. And this is a typical first interval right here. Like this is a kind of fresh after recovery. So you see this low spot, come up, sit in behind the group, come up, sit in behind the group, come up, sit in behind the group. But all of these I tried to keep pretty consistent and relatively low. So little nerdy kind of ish breakdown. Ran with Kendall today. It was good to get out. I was not planning to get out and do anything, but thankfully for her, she keeps me in line. So not a lot to speak of this week. I'll be doing some swimming next week, probably Monday, Tuesday, and then we come back in town, and so probably Saturday, Sunday. We got Triple Bypass in a couple weeks, and then Big Nasty right here, 4 weeks out. So that's pretty much it. Nothing really to speak of that's exciting. I guess if you look at total hours, 4.5 a couple weeks ago, 4 hours 3 weeks ago, 9, 12. So you get a little bit focused right here, and then looks like about 6 hours total this week. So nothing super sexy. It's all going to hurt on race day, and I'm not going to be able to walk for 2, maybe 3 days after, but I'll deal with that when I get there. So sorry for the delay. I hope you guys take something away from this and maybe apply it to your own training, or it creates a question you can ask myself or your own coach. So thank you guys for tuning into the journey.